Welcome, Peter Buffett. It's so good to talk to you again. Thanks for taking the time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on again. I appreciate it.
Great. I'd like to talk today about power. There's such a conflict and tension right now with the presidential campaign and this great power struggle that's happening in our country ideologically, as well as socially. I'd like to start by telling you something I heard the other night. I was having dinner with some folks, and somebody said that today influence is the new power. That influence over money is really the new paradigm of power. Would you agree with that or disagree?
Well, I guess I see it maybe as part of a layered cake in terms of how people, it's like an action step of power. And influence over things means I think that you have power over how different kinds of energy might be released in the world. Because when you use it as saying influence over money, I think, well, that's influence over sort of, and I always hate to sound a little too new agey or something, but it's the energy of money being released into the system, and where you put that, that's where the garden will grow. And so, I think influence is one way to exercise power, essentially. And I think that the challenge is whether, and this is a well-worn phrase at this point, whether it's power over or power with, right? So I think, to get right to the heart of it, I think that's what I hope can it be a shift in the world, essentially.
Say more about that, Peter. Power with as opposed to power over.
Well, I think power over has been is pretty worn out at this point. I think it's seems to be driving our very young species into a ditch because it's from an old competitive. There might be there may not be enough kind of framework, scarcity, and so power is used to control resources and basically out of fear of there not being enough. And power with means that you already assume there will be enough, and that equitable distribution of things, whether it's power itself or the various things we need to get through our daily lives, is shared because there is enough, because you're actually thinking abundantly and safely as opposed to in fear. So I think power with is hopefully, and I think probably necessarily, evolutionarily, where we're going, where we need to go as a species to survive, frankly.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Not to put too fine a point on it.
No, I completely agree with that. So what you're talking about is a new paradigm of power, which isn't about us versus them. It's a connective, empathic, more of a global look at power. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yes and no, because it is shifting the paradigm, absolutely, and shifting what you could also call the consciousness around what power is. But I think it's actually going in reverse and saying that really true power with true collaborative, nurturing, safe power that is a combining of forces can only, I think, happen on a pretty small scale. I think that what's going on around us is a product mostly of scale, and that things are too big and too centralized and too disassociated to be in relationship to each other. And we don't know where our food comes from. We don't know a lot of things. Finances, you could go on and on about sort of centralized and, again, power over kind of feeling. And so I think that part of whatever shift is necessary is also very dependent on the scale at which it can be implemented, which is to say small, which is to say community and family and local and all these things that we seem to, in our culture right now think that everything must be growing and bigger to matter. And therein lies a problem.
So it's the power of smaller.
It is. It's small power with, as opposed to big power over, and the power, it's still there, but it emanates and disseminates in a very different way.
Right. So tell me, Peter, as a deep thinker, somebody who has a foundation, you're involved in philanthropy as well as being an artist. When you look at what's going on with this presidential campaign, what do you feel? Do you feel fear? Do you feel dread? Do you feel optimistic? What's your gut sense?
My gut sense is it's necessary. Is that there's something necessary going on, and if I'm too fearful or angry or scared, or that's fearful, I feel like I'm feeding it. And although it's important to react to it, and if you see something, say something in terms of what's going on, at the same time, it's gotten everybody to sit up a lot straighter and go, wait a minute, what is going on? And where did this come from? And how did we miss that much anger and frustration and fear in a sector of the population that we thought was kind of okay in a way, or whatever. We didn't think about it at all. I think that's more the point, is that nobody fully voiced before, and I'm talking about now, obviously, Trump, a disaffection amongst a demographic that was clearly quiet in some way or another. And so it does feel, again, sort of like it's necessary, and that it is born out of a flawed, a wonderful idea, America, and all the things that have sprung forth over the past few hundred years, but also that there were some deep flaws in the beginning that now are starting to really show up.
So what you're saying is that this anomaly of Trump, the rabble-rousing that's been going on, has actually had an empowering effect on the left and on the consciousness movement?
I think it has. Yeah, I mean, I hate to, give it too much credit, but I do think that, when things come into sharper focus, it gets everybody, more focused as well, more clear on things that maybe were just under the surface, or just somehow scooting along. I mean, it was 100 years from the Civil War to civil rights. These things percolate or not, depending on which end of the rope you're on. They can go along for quite some time until finally somebody says, "Hey, wait a minute," and it's too bad that it takes egregious behavior or some kind of crisis to get people to sit up and take notice. But if that's what it takes, well, here we are, and it's time to do something about it.
Great. Tell me, Peter, I just want to change subjects a bit. Is there an antidote to greed, do you think?
What a great question. I don't know. I think the antidote to any symptom, which I think greed must be, of ultimately fear, scarcity, maybe, I don't know where patriarchy falls ultimately in that, whether it's a symptom of fear or the other way around or whatever, however it works. I think it's ultimately love, bottom line, and then compassion, understanding, respect, honoring, all those things that come from a loving place. And so greed is again, I think, just a symptom of this larger force that can only be dispelled through a loving and kind nature. I mean, it's basic Buddhism, I guess. But I think that's the only antidote. I think that we have to be in abundance and recognize that we're just a small little piece of this big thing that's moving along the biosphere, Earth, evolution, consciousness, and that we better humble ourselves and start loving each other. Yeah, Sounds kind of, again, I feel like I'm a hippie in the woods, but you know what? I've become a hippie in the woods.
Actually, it makes total sense. It's very sane, and that was beautifully said. Tell me, Peter, what can men learn from women about power?
Well, again, I try and shy a little bit away from making it a gender, which I understand, why you do that and why anybody would do that. But the thing I've learned is that we are whole, each one of us, and that includes a masculine and a feminine side that is slowly or not so slowly wrung out of us, depending on which gender you are. But specifically men, I think at an earlier age, kind of get the feminine aspects of them, which does make them whole, wrung out of them in a variety of ways. So what men can learn from women about power is, wow, how do you say that? Because it's really acknowledging maybe what constitutes a power in relationship and in, again, loving relationship and life force versus power that is fearful and afraid. I mean, women they give birth. They have a connection to life form, life force, nurturing. They have a connection that men don't have. It doesn't mean one's better or more important or whatever. It's just it's a difference, and that's where men can learn what attention to life force, what nurturing life force can do for all of us. How do I say it? I mean, it's what I've seen is women essentially martyr themselves for the good of the future and the good of their children and again the good of love, and that's not good. that shouldn't be happening, but it shows you the strength of it and the power of it and the fact that it will take over oftentimes a woman's sense of her own survival, and in fact men have taken advantage of that for hundreds and probably thousands and thousands of years. And so men can learn a lot about the importance of nurturing and just a loving nature and being in relation to life force versus fear and power over again.
Mm. I remember years ago you said something I've never forgotten. You said that men are afraid of women because of their intuition, that men fear women's intuition. So I'm wondering about intuition and power. What's that connection, do you think?
Well, I think that that women are, because they're so trained, and again, I'm generalizing, and somebody could take this and turn it all upside down in the wrong way, but women, because they are so connected to life force, they are their intuition is stronger because they sort of are trained to be on the lookout to protect and to protect, among other things. I mean, men do too, but there's a different quality to it in women, and if you can intuit well, you're essentially meeting the future faster. I think that's what I had said before too, is that you're really, you're tuned in a way that I believe all of us were early in our development, and we've lost it over time. It's sort of atrophied as other things have come into play. But it's very powerful if you can hone and improve, really trust ultimately your intuition and its strength, and that is powerful. And I think that men have shunted that in so many ways over the past few hundred years in particular, but really science and certain things that are good and important, but they square off this circle, of life. Otherwise, I don't know how else to explain it, but but yeah, there's great power in that, and I think it is, and I think men do fear that, and I also think that men. This might be going off on a tangent here too much, so stop me if you have other questions you'd rather ask.
No, go right ahead.
I really have. It's become clear that since the Industrial Revolution, 200 years ago, we were all farming. We were all busy. We all had a role to play. We worked hard. The home was a unit of production, really. Food and all the things we needed, we made, and we were connected to, and we again felt purposeful in our evolution and taking care of our kids. And when the Industrial Revolution came along, it did all the work that most of the men did, or a lot of the work. So suddenly, by the early 20th century, there were thousands and thousands of men with essentially nothing to do because the farm work was being handled by machines, and a lot of the other work, too, handled by machines. And so it's no surprise that if you look at the development of the economy, of consumerism, of all these things that have sort of gotten out of hand over the last 100 and some years, it's when men were purposeless, when they didn't actually have a legitimate reason, quite literally, to be moving the species forward because the machines were doing all the hard work. And so I think what you've got is a current system that's made up. Now, science and technology and certain things filled in some gaps, so it's not as if everybody was around doing nothing. But the bureaucracy and the whole structure of our culture is basically built out of men trying to be legitimate and make things up so they looked important.
Mm. That's so interesting.
It feels somewhat undeniable. The more history I read, the more everything seems to point to the same thing. It's like we have got a whole bunch of men trying to be important. And of course, what would come up with Trump better than that? It seems almost inevitable that you'd end up getting this guy, blowing himself up in terms of how important and amazing he is.
It's absolutely true. Let me ask you one last question, Peter, and it really concerns conscience. You're in a unique position to be able to help, and I wonder, how do you is there ever a struggle of conscience around who to give to, who to help? How do you square that circle, so to speak?
Yeah. Well, it's incredibly difficult because of the time we're in more than anything else. There are so many people in need, communities in need, organizations in need, people that are getting up every day, fighting a fight and doing amazing, beautiful things just to keep the world from not hurting a little bit more today than yesterday. And so it's difficult. And so what you try and do is create an organization that is some reflection of the world you want to see better, make better, whatever. I don't know how to say it because it's create conditions. We talk about creating conditions for change. It's like growing vegetables. The farmer doesn't grow the vegetables. He creates the conditions so they can grow themselves. So we have a staff at the foundation that has a deeply felt knowledge and understanding of some of the communities we're going into to try and support. And then you also start from the bottom up. So you ask people themselves. You don't walk in like a colonial mindset and say, we know your problem and we're going to fix it and all that. So you shift the dynamic as much as you can. So you're hearing truth from people that have lived experience. And then you try and identify where can the money go to really create conditions for true systemic change. And that's the hardest part because we're all inside this structure. And it's not easy to get structural with everything. But but we try our best so that we're listening intently and honoring the experience, and then looking to see what may be on the surface looks like one thing, but it's actually a much larger thing. And can we get to that? Can we shift the levers there? And we're constantly learning and trying to get better at that.
Great. Well, you do fantastic work in the world, Peter, and I wish you great luck. And I'll talk to you again really soon.
Thank you so much. I wish us all luck at this point. And yes, may we have a beautiful, bright future ahead of us.
Absolutely, my friend. Thank you.